Farma is an ordinary boy reincarnated into another world, wielding godlike power to shame medieval doctors for not having invented soap yet. While everyone else is chanting spells, he's busy visualizing molecular structures and single-handedly pushing medicine forward in a world where letting your patients die is basically considered proper treatment. Our story begins in the Molecular Development Laboratory of T University, where Professor Kanji Yakutani worked as though tomorrow did not exist. He was so absorbed in his research that he failed to notice his guest for quite some time. The visitor had arrived to discuss a joint research project, and understanding Kanji's overwhelming workload, Matsumoto reassured the staff that the professor would eventually come. Kanji's brilliance was unmistakable, evident even in the way he absent-mindedly dropped his notebooks while racing between experiments. By the time he finished his work, Kanji finally realized how much time had passed. He had gone so long without rest that he had forgotten to eat or drink, or even glance at the photograph of his younger sister pinned nearby. She had passed away after a long battle with terminal illness. What haunted Kanji most was the fact that her tumor could not be fully removed, ultimately costing her life. From that day forward, he resolved that there would be no room for fate, chance, or misfortune in medicine ever again. After completing a final experiment, Kanji decided to take a short nap, reflecting on how long it had been since he last met a client. The 45 minutes he intended to rest stretched far longer. When morning came, Matsumoto entered the lab and found him sleeping peacefully. However, when Kanji awoke, he found himself lying in a bed before a pink-haired girl named Charlotte. She addressed him as Master Farma, explaining that he had fallen into a coma after being struck by lightning. Confused, Kanji now Farma staggered to the window and opened it, immediately realizing this was not his world. The mirror confirmed it. The face staring back was not his own. Realizing he had died from overwork and reincarnated into what felt like a stereotypical isekai dream, Farma was unsure how to proceed. Charlotte believed his memories were merely disordered and reintroduced herself, reminding him that he usually called her Latte. She prepared to remove his bandages at his request. Alone once more, Farma removed the note he had written on his wrist in his previous life. As Charlotte helped him clean himself with damp towels, she noticed a strange mark on his left arm. She identified it as the holy mark of Panakthios and prayed, believing the gods had chosen to protect him. She was startled when Farma asked whether Panakthios was the god of chaos and fear, correcting himself upon learning Panakthios was instead the god of medicine. To avoid confusing her further, Farma chose to confirm details about his new life. Charlotte explained that Farma belonged to the de Médicis family, an aristocratic house within the St. Fleuve Empire renowned for pharmaceutical expertise. His father Bruno was both the Archduke and president of the Imperial School of Pharmacy. Farma felt pride and excitement upon seeing portraits of his parents. He also learned he now had siblings, an older brother named Palais and a younger sister named Blanche. Palais still attended the most influential medical university in the world, which placed immense expectations on both brothers. Their father expected excellence not only in medicine but also in divine arts, known as magic. To Charlotte's surprise, Farma had forgotten magic existed, despite once being skilled at it. In this world, magic signified nobility. Without it, Farma risked losing status and possibly his home. Once alone, Farma contemplated how to regain his water magic. Recalling Charlotte's explanation, he drew parallels between magic flow and the molecular structure of water. This insight worked, though stopping the magic proved difficult. He rushed to the window to release the excess power, struggling until he finally halted it. Though soaked, Charlotte was ecstatic that her master had rediscovered magic and went to change her clothes. Encouraged, Farma experimented further. Using his left hand, he successfully created substances, while his right hand eliminated elements entirely. After erasing everything he made, Charlotte burst in excitedly, then suddenly worried that Farma might have lost his medical knowledge. His father was known for surprise quizzes during meals. Alarmed, Farma rushed to the library and discovered he had memorized every book. Bruno had given him a specialized pharmaceutical education, yet Farma noticed the text resembled medieval medical scriptures. Soon after, Farma joined his parents for lunch, reassuring them he had recovered from the lightning strike. He resolved to live fully as Farma alongside his loving family. As expected, Bruno tested him with a medical question, which Farma answered correctly. Pleased, Bruno informed him that he would resume studies with instructor Eleonor starting the next day. Farma readily agreed. The following morning, Eleonor immediately sensed a change in Farma. Her suspicion deepened when he addressed her formally, instead of calling her Ellen. He blamed the lapse on the lightning incident. Believing his divine arts were most affected, Eleonor focused on magic training rather than pharmaceuticals. She explained that Farma's powers, like his father's and brothers, came from Panakthios, while hers came from Hydrotheos. She reviewed the 5 attributes of divine arts: water, fire, wind, earth, and none. The last intrigued Farma. Eleonor admitted that even she knew little about it, as the last recorded case was 3 centuries old. When Farma asked whether substance creation qualified, she rejected the idea, stating such an ability would belong only to gods or monsters. At the training grounds, Eleonor realized Farma lacked his wand. She lent him hers and demonstrated a water spear spell. Farma copied her successfully, but with overwhelming force sending her flying. Shocked, Eleonor noticed he had cast the spell without an incantation. She used a testing wand, which shattered instantly under his power. For the first time in her career, a student had broken a devonomy. Checking his arm, she saw Panactheos' glowing mark. Pharma called it a Lichtenberg figure, but Eleanor insisted divine marks did not glow. She warned him never to hold a devonometer publicly, especially near his father. Pharma agreed, and the lesson ended. On the way back, Pharma noticed Eleanor avoiding the ground and offered her rest. While seated, he suggested she mimic wearing glasses with her fingers. Though embarrassed, she tried it and was surprised it helped. When Pharma attempted the same, he noticed her injured fingers from earlier. Explaining his observation, he made Eleanor realize his abilities were not divine blessings. What terrified her most was noticing Pharma had no shadow. Panicked, she fled. The next day, Pharma was taken aback by Eleanor excusing herself from tutoring him entirely, which got his father to raise his eyebrows. Naturally, Pharma didn't mention anything about what happened yesterday, so he blamed it on her fever, making her feel down, much to his father's disappointment. As such, Bruno ordered his son to deliver her a potion and a letter. After taking a look at the ingredients he was given, Pharma became well aware that they're only nutrients, so he decided on making them serve the purpose of treating her fever. When he got to her house, Pharma kept on waiting there like a good boy, only for Eleanor to make a crusader entrance. After all, she was still horrified by their last encounter that she assumed Pharma had come to eliminate her. It was only after he assured her that he means no harm to her that Eleanor finally began to feel slightly at ease. And I really mean it when I said slightly, as she got back to freaking out again after assuming that Pharma must have put poison in the medicines his father sent to her, twice. Pharma proceeded to assure her that he means no harm towards her, before asking her to keep on being his tutor. Once she finally became assured, Eleanor agreed to oblige to his request, promising him that his dirty little secret will never be known by anyone, his father included. In fact, Pharma needed Eleanor's tutoring since his family's library contains no useful information, and Eleanor's help will come in handy as he assumed that the pharmaceutical knowledge had been passed orally for generations. On top of that, Pharma clearly has no control over his abilities. Although he got his point across, Pharma did not pressure her into accepting if her mind was made. After giving her some flowers, Pharma apologized for scaring her and left. That evening, Eleanor couldn't help but think about her conversation with Pharma earlier that day, before trying to brush it off. Nevertheless, the knowledge that Pharma brought her favorite flowers made her reconsider her options. And so it was that she did show up before Pharma the next day, albeit clad in heavy armor. This made Pharma delighted, although he couldn't believe that his powers had the potential to level the entire Imperial City if his powers went out of control. Aside from that, Eleanor thanked him sincerely for the salve and the bitter powder he gave her, which immediately improved her condition. With all that out of the way, Eleanor decided to take her student to an uninhabited island, in order to not cause any harm to the Imperial City. It was there that Eleanor had done her best to get Pharma to get a grip on his divine arts, which went just as you might expect. Although little to no progress had been made, Eleanor was relieved to see her determined and optimistic. Pharma was to keep on practicing. Once at home, Pharma abused his magic usage to heal others left and right, including a person's bad lower back. However, Pharma was still feeling down. After all, his very existence in this world is nothing short of a heresy. After all, his lack of shadow and his extraordinary abilities might get him executed in a horrific way if they were to get discovered. As such, he decided that the best way to keep his head between his shoulders would be by being indispensable. To make sure he gets to that, Pharma went to his room, where lots of pharmaceutical equipment were there, much to his delight. As such, he decided to make some moisturizers for Charlotte to use on her hands, which was a lot easier for him to do thanks to his ability to create all the substances he needs, be it in solid or liquid form. Although the process took him a while, Pharma was ultimately successful in creating his medicine. Eventually, Pharma gifted this medicine to Charlotte, as a thanks for all the hard work she has been doing for him and his family. Charlotte was delighted by that, so much so she asked if Pharma could make that cream for the rest of the mansion servants, as well as her mother. Pharma agreed, but only after explaining to each one of them separately what their condition is and what they need for their treatment. Indeed, Pharma was true to his word on gifting these meds to other workers in the mansion. In fact, this was a first for them to ever get gifted something from their master. After all, it's been an unspoken rule that aristocrats never examine commoners. Even if they did, their treatments will be too expensive for any peasant to afford. For Pharma, he was against such practices. He couldn't bear to see the aristocrats using actual medicines to treat their illnesses, while leaving commoners and peasants to rely on shams and superstitions. As he was thinking of a way to make more effective medicines and more affordable for lower classes to afford, Charlotte mentioned that Pharma had never treated her before, since his father prohibited him from doing so. This had surprised Pharma, but he shifted the blame on not wanting to help her with half-baked knowledge, which made him promise her to make better meds to help her and the rest of her social class. Although he did his best to remain humble, Charlotte insisted that he's been exceptionally kind today. The next morning, Pharma went to have breakfast with his parents, where he was immediately met with the news that his sister Blanche had caught chickenpox. Although his parents were worried sick about her, Pharma was thinking in the back of his mind about what he already knew about the illness. In normal conditions, the sickness would have mild effects on a 4-year-old child, but judging by his parents' reaction, Pharma assumed that chickenpox here is far more dangerous. While he was at it, Bruno stood up and ordered that no one should approach Blanche for the next 3 weeks to prevent the virus from spreading, while only a handful of servants will take care of her instead. Since he was aware that his son is immune to the disease, Bruno allowed Pharma to visit her, although he still ordered him to be careful since there's no guarantee that this immunity is a lifelong one. This did impress Pharma, since this fact became recent knowledge in the modern world very recently. Once he got to his room, Pharma didn't sit idle, as he began to think of a medicine to create to cure his sister. After figuring out the ingredients he needs, Pharma began creating them separately, before proceeding to mixing them. Seeing that no mansion staff are nearby, Pharma snuck his way into his sister's room. It was there where Pharma began to check on his sister's condition. Blanche was worried that her father might get angry at Pharma if he ever got caught, but the latter assured her that everything will be okay if this remains a secret. While they were at it, Pharma thought of a trick to give his medicine to his sister, so he decided to make her get it in a macaron. Although she was skeptical initially, Blanche believed in her brother and took the medicine, after being told to drink lots of water with it. A while later, Blanche recalled that her father told her that there's no medicines for her sickness, which made Pharma panic with every ongoing question, before dismissing it as another secret for her to keep. Suddenly, Blanche began to feel itchy. Pharma tried to warn her against it, as that will make the virus spread over her skin, which made Blanche wonder what a virus is. Aware that the concept of bacteria and viruses are not known in this world, Pharma described them as ghosts, which scared the little Blanche for a bit. After assuring her that he got what it takes to help her recover, Blanche couldn't help but mention how different her brother is now compared to before, although she couldn't deny that she loves this version of her brother just like the old one. This struck a very strong resemblance between Blanche and Chiyu, Kanji's deceased sister, to the point that Pharma began to cry. A few days later, Bruno went to check on his daughter, only to be surprised by how fast her recovery was. Just when Blanche was about to spill the beans, however, she stood true to her word. Later that same day, while being busy with creating something, Pharma was beginning to think that his powers are probably way too great, to the point he began to think that there must be a catch he has yet to figure out. Before he could figure that out, he finished creating his microscope. Before he could celebrate his intention, Simon came in to inform him that his father wishes to see him immediately. When the two met, Bruno ordered his son to pack his bag at once, since there'll be an emergency meeting with the Empress. Although Bruno seemed to be in no good shape, the Empress's health took a sudden decline, which required her to make for Bruno's house immediately to get treatment. Aware of his father's condition being bad, Pharma wanted to inspect it, but the former was too quick to prevent him from that, as well as insisting he prepare himself to accompany him at once. Overnight, the mansion became filled with imperial figures. Bruno managed to meet up with one of the other archdukes of the empire, Claude de Chauliac, as he was accompanying his youngest son outside. Unfortunately for them, the Empress's condition seemed to only get worse, as her lungs had grown significantly weaker. As they entered the room, they had to bear witness to the sorry state their Empress Elizabeth II became in. After taking all the necessary tests, and after long debates with other doctors, doom and gloom became the order of the day, as everyone reached a general consensus that the Empress won't be living for much longer. However, Bruno insisted that he continues his job with his son's help. After preparing an anesthetic potion, Bruno approached the Empress, who asked him if her case is beyond hopeless, only for the former to deny that. As he made her breathe the anesthetic gas, Pharma was well aware that this could do little to lessen her pain. On the other hand, Archduke Claude gave the order to call for the priests to come at first light, as he was expecting that the Empress might not even make it through the night. Pharma was well aware of that, and he grew increasingly frustrated by the lack of will to save the Empress. Not wanting to sit on the sidelines, Pharma used his eye to identify the monarch's sickness, which turned out to be tuberculosis. Aware that there's no way to give her any injections for the lack thereof at this time, his only way would be an oral route. If that wasn't enough, the medicines he was willing to give her are not guaranteed to work on her, which makes him on the verge of taking a gamble. While he was lost in his thoughts, the Empress's son Louis and his adjutant Noah's rushed in to check on her health. Noah tried to prevent the young prince from disrupting his mother's rest, but the latter insisted he stays by her side, thus leaving the Empress and her entourage in tears. For Pharma, this was the last straw, as he decided spontaneously to approach the Empress in person and requested that he treat her. To the surprise of everyone around him, Pharma claimed boldly that there is a treatment for her illness. Bruno tried to stop what he considered as a lame jest, while Claude pleaded for Her Majesty to reconsider. However, Elizabeth believed that she's in the good hands of the greatest practitioners of divine arts in the Empire, and that this is no joking matter for her, which is why she decided to trust Pharma with her life. With permission granted, Pharma shut his lab's door, ignored his father's calls and began working in earnest, as he was now in a race against time to save the Empress. After going through all of his options, which included all of his chemical formulas, Pharma was about to forge the ingredients for the medicines, when his father finally stormed into the lab. Bruno was well aware that the Empress is suffering from tuberculosis, and was also aware that there's no treatment to this so-called White Death, much to the surprise of Pharma. Despite that, Pharma insisted that he make the medicine for both the Empress and his father, as he was aware that his father is suffering from it too. As he got back to make his ingredients, Pharma got attacked by Bruno, who assumed that Pharma's inability to explain what he's creating means that he's going to poison the Empress. However, Bruno got taken by surprise when he saw his son not only blocking his attacks, but without using a wand of incantation no less. Left with no other option, Pharma told his father that this power and knowledge he received were a revelation to him on the day he got thunderstruck. Hearing this, and after taking a closer look at his notebook, Bruno decided to let his son continue treating the Empress. Pharma thought that it'll be best that his father give the medicine to the Empress himself, in order to preserve his status among the nobility, but Bruno insisted that this is his son's medicine, and it is his duty alone to deliver it. Hearing this, Pharma agreed before impressing his father by evaporating the frozen wall he built earlier. Bruno couldn't believe that the young boy that used to cry when a chemical reaction took place before him is now constructing and deconstructing elements out of thin air, which made him begin thinking if that's actually Pharma, only for the latter to answer that he considers himself as such. A while later, Pharma arrived with medicine in hand. Many of the nobles frowned at how he was covering his face before them, while Claude believed that Bruno had fled the scene altogether, despite Pharma's assurances that he didn't. Indeed, while Pharma went closer to the Empress, Bruno arrived to inform Claude that Pharma's knowledge had far surpassed that of the brightest minds of the Empire, and that all they could do now is watch. Before Pharma could serve his medicine, he thought that he would publicly display how it'll work on a sample of her blood, where everyone, starting with the Empress herself, had to witness the tiny creatures that lives on her sample. After Pharma identified these bugs as the actual cause of her tuberculosis, he made it clear that the treatment he'll prescribe for her will cure her within 6 weeks, as long as it's taken on a regular basis. Although Claude believed that this period is way too long, the Empress decided to fully believe in Pharma. To make sure he gets her full trust, Pharma drank the medicine before her, while assuring her that he'll be by her side to take her treatment every day for the next 6 months. Once he was done with the Empress, Pharma turned to the public and declared that once this medicine succeeds, while the public were impressed by his divine arts, Elizabeth II gave a look of thanks to Bruno for this young treasure he gave birth to. Once they were on their way back home, Bruno couldn't help but reflect on how he was treating Pharma so far. Although he believed he had done what he thought was right to raise a great pharmacist, he found out that he failed to do any fatherly thing to his son. Once they got back home, Pharma decided to give his father the medicine to take too, which the latter gladly took, after admitting that he still has room to improve. Pharma, however, admitted that although he has the knowledge, he learned from Bruno how to deal with a patient on the verge of death, which is why he wants to pursue the path of medicine together with his father. Bruno gratefully agreed, much to the delight of their family. In the 3 months since they got called to the imperial house, Bruno and Pharma began to exchange their knowledge, where the former surprised his son with a request from the Novilaut College of Medicines to give them the recipe for the tuberculosis medicine. Fortunately for Pharma, Bruno convinced them to go away, by telling them that this medicine is a miracle of God. However, Pharma made it clear that this treatment does not need divine arts to create it, and eventually, he'll make its production recipe becoming public knowledge. After having a brief discussion over the greater good it'll serve to allow people that can't use divine arts to practice medicines as well, be it if it was the will of Panactheos that says so or not. For Bruno, however, Pharma's beliefs from his point of view are considered to be heresy, which will attract some seriously unwanted attention from people inside and outside of the pharmaceutical circle. On that regard, Bruno heard rumors from the Imperial Palace that the White Death had been passed on intentionally to get rid of the Empress. Pharma didn't believe in this story, as the chances that this would happen are way too slim, thus making the story to be too far-fetched. Before he knew it, Pharma realized that the time to attend to the Empress's treatment had arrived, and that he should take his leave immediately. Once he got there, Noah prevented Pharma from entering the Empress directly, just to have a word with him. Since he heard rumors about the Empress contemplating what she should reward Pharma with for saving her life, Noah was curious on what might Pharma want to get in exchange, be it wealth, prestige, or even territory. Much to his annoyance, Pharma wanted nothing in particular. When asked about any future goals that the Empress might even help him with, however, Pharma immediately stated that he wants to open up a pharmacy for both commoners and aristocrats to get an affordable treatment for their illnesses, which Noah couldn't even comprehend. Nevertheless, Pharma went ahead to meet up with the Empress, where the medicine seemed to be working well, thus improving her condition significantly. Despite that, Pharma made it clear that although this treatment does not guarantee that the Empress will be immune to this sickness in the future. Although she was surprised by the sudden shift in his demeanor, Elizabeth was aware that his grandiose speech in their first encounter to the public was just instilling hope in her heart, especially after suffering a rapid decline mentally, physically, and even politically. Although she felt like no one will ever need her after this crisis, Pharma reminded her that her son Louis still needs her the most, let alone many of her subjects that still look up to her. Hearing this, Elizabeth began to giggle, as Pharma's word rejuvenated her cause once more. Before he could take his leave, however, Pharma reminded her that humans always move towards death, which is why she should value and cherish life for as long as she's still alive. A few months later, Elizabeth summoned Bruno in order to discuss matters concerning Pharma, which ended up with Bruno inviting his son to a banquet held by the Empress in person, who he met once again upon entering the palace's ballroom. Thanks to his efforts in treating the Empress, as well as training a brilliant future generation of pharmaceutists, Bruno got rewarded the territory of Marcira. Once his father was fully rewarded for his accomplishments, Pharma came in next. Although he got nervous after getting so much attention, the Empress ordered Pharma to step forward. Thanks to saving the Empress's life, Pharma got promoted from an apprentice to an actual pharmacist. That's not all, in fact, as the Empress gave him special permission to open up a pharmacy in the capital in order to serve the best interest of the citizens, as well as the Empress herself. Seeing that her court was delighted for his achievement, Pharma felt relieved, as this would be the catalyst for a much brighter future. Much to his surprise, however, the Empress ordered the beginning of construction of Pharma's pharmacy immediately. Pharma found this problematic, as he was not ready for that yet. The craftsmen that the Empress had already ordered, however, were very ready, and they're all eager to start working on this project. To top that off, Eleanor came to the scene under Bruno's orders to assist Pharma. The latter still couldn't decide on how he wanted his pharmacy to look like. The artisans informed him that if they don't start working immediately, the guillotine will. It only needed Eleanor to get that point across, that Pharma finally started considering his options, before the former interfering once again to get him to give the order to start immediately. Although the artisan were surprised by his blueprint, they started working immediately as soon as he was done. In fact, they were so impressed by how meticulous the plan was that work went splendidly smoothly. When asked about the name of the pharmacy, Pharma began to contemplate in such a loud voice. So much so the artisans overheard him mentioning the name Parallel World Pharmacy, and decided to go with it, much to his dismay. Although he thought this name could bring up some negative attention, Eleanor made it clear that that won't matter, because the fact that the son of an archduke is working in what's considered as a shop will definitely get him in a confrontation with plenty of highly established pharmaceutics from all over the empire. Speaking of trouble, it all began now with the arrival of a fat nobleman called Veron, who assumed that Pharma was just an employee there. When he asked for the proprietor, Pharma introduced himself as such. From his grin, Veron was well aware of who Pharma was, so after introducing himself as the head of the Fleuve Pharmaceutic Guild, before beginning to make an ironic thrust at Pharma, although he provoked Eleanor, Pharma remained calm and collected, as the old man kept on growing increasingly hostile toward this newcomer pharmacist. This back and forth persisted until Eleanor finally had enough, thus putting an end to this Wide Walker's farce, before he excused himself. Eventually, Pharma and Eleanor finished inspecting all of their tools and materials. They were glad that they got Pharma to create medicines, while Eleanor will be in charge of the commercial section. However, neither could manage accounting well, so they ended up relying on Charlotte for that, as she was on top of being able to read and write. She's pretty good with arithmetics. That wasn't an easy decision to make though, as it took Charlotte a lot of convincing to get Pharma to agree on allowing her to run errands for the shop. Joyous at this turn of events, Charlotte decided to perform her dance of gratitude. However, that still didn't solve Pharma's problem for finding a trustworthy accountant. Once he got back home that evening, Pharma was surprised to see everyone gathered around Cedric in tears. After all, this is his last day at work here, and now he's going to retire. Since his knees were in such a terrible state that even if he wanted to work, his knees were racked. After learning that Cedric will still work if his knees were treated, Pharma declared that he'll treat his knees in exchange for having him working at his pharmacy. After getting his father's permission to hire Cedric, Pharma got taken aback when he saw his father gifting him a large sum of money for his starting venture. Although he rejected it at first, Pharma ended up relenting to accepting the gift from him. If that wasn't enough, Pharma ended up receiving a charter from the Empress herself, which contributed to the successful opening of his pharmacy. Amidst his speech about making affordable medicines for the broader public, however, many commoners were gathering with a great deal of resentment and confusion, since in their belief this noble is completely out of touch. Meanwhile, Veron, Bruno and his family were watching from afar, with each one having a different reaction. Although it's been a month since they started, things were not going well for Pharma. In fact, there's only a handful of noble pharmaceutists in the empire. None of the commoners ever gets near those, as they prefer tagging along the pharmacies that were made for commoners by commoners. Just as Pharma was thinking of a way to get the commoners to come to his pharmacy, Charlotte came back, after conducting a survey, where the general consensus of the public was that they're scared of the imperial seal on the pharmacy. That would be the least of their problems, as the public were not sure on how to even talk to a noble in the first place, much less to the son of an archduke. On top of that, they're not sure if their clothes are presentable enough for this noble. The guards outside are intimidating, and if that wasn't enough, they were concerned that the proprietor is a child, as well as what does cheap and affordable mean when a noble is actually saying it. Realizing that the latter point is the elephant in the room, Cedric suggested that they make a list which includes the prices of all the medicines and their examination fees. With more issues like low literacy level among the commoners being noted, Cedric suggested that they sit down and brainstorm solutions for all the challenges they're going to have. Eventually, the shop had its first regular, an old man called Jones, who seems to be working in the seas. Having him becoming a regular in the pharmacy made Charlotte and Eleanor become full of hope to have a second and a third regulars. However, as Pharma wanted to learn more about what problems Jones had, the latter decided to leave abruptly, much to the surprise of Pharma, who followed him suit, only to discover that he's conspiring against him with other pharmacists. Before he could do anything, however, Pharma was surprised to see his mom and dad arriving in the most convincing disguise they can ever think of. Aside from that, Pharma took them both on a tour around the pharmacy, which seemed to be impressive. When asked about his client's traffic, however, Pharma admitted that he's having difficulty attracting commoners. After giving it some thought, his mother suggested that he start by selling cosmetics to aristocrats, which will eventually attract the commoners once they see that their prices are affordable. His father also supported the idea on condition that he never make white powder cosmetics, since he saw that it's the reason why ladies die early. Much to Farma's surprise, Bruno is actually right. That's not all, however, as Bruno also wanted his son to never engage in other unethical medical practices, such as removing excess blood to become pale, which became a common practice among salons nowadays. This conversation eventually evolved from a serious one between two pharmacists into a flirtatious one between Beatrice and Bruno, which the latter concluded by reminding her that they're before their own child. While they were at it, a commoner rushed in, asking Farma to help his lady. Farma quickly obliged. It didn't take them long to reach the chart where Lady Chloe de Chatillon was in, where he immediately noticed how pale she was looking. After thorough inspection, Farma took notice of several cuts on her left arm, which he concluded that they were caused by the removal of excess blood practice, even though she wasn't ill by any means. Subsequently, the injuries themselves became infected. In order to get to her case better, Farma demanded that she come with him to his pharmacy at once. Once they got there, Chloe broke into tears at the fact that her crush rejected her because she does not have pale skin, which is why she decided to undergo this procedure, even if it was life-threatening. After giving her the treatment she needs, Farma advised her to cease the usage of white powder, to which Chloe refused, as she was yearning to get her crush's attention. When Charlotte asked him if there's anything that could be done, Farma asked Chloe to come back next week to get the cosmetic product she needs. During that period, Farma went as far as to turn himself into a femboy, if he wasn't effeminate enough as is. Although Eleanor was concerned that he's not heeding his father's advice, Farma assured her that he's not using any toxic materials that would affect human health negatively, such as mercury, much to Eleanor's surprise. Naturally, Farma intends on reporting this to the Empress on their next meeting. On the agreed day, Chloe came back to the pharmacy to get the promised cosmetic. To her surprise, it didn't turn out to be a powder, but a cream, as Farma pointed out that will even help against sunburns. Once she was done with putting the cream on, Eleanor proceeded with putting some loose white powder over Chloe's face, which made her look paler, yet fresher. Lastly, Farma also gave her another product to use to remove the cosmetics off her face later, as it also improves skin condition. This came as a wonderful surprise for Chloe, as she no longer had to practice bloodletting. Eventually, Farma went to have samples distributed to the wider public, as very affordable cosmetics that nobles are using. This strategy attracted the commoners from all ages, which made the clients' traffic in the pharmacy subsequently prosper. Eventually, the pharmacy became the talk of both the nobles and commoners alike, so much so that Chloe was no longer able to get her cosmetics. Apparently, this shortage was caused by the lack of sufficient staffs to keep up with the high demand. As such, Chloe suggested that he starts an independent subsidiary company for cosmetics, which will be financed by Chloe in person. Farma wasn't sure about it initially, but Cedric assured him that it'll be great to team up with the Chatillon family as business partners, as they're very trustworthy. Hearing this, Farma agreed to strike a deal with Chloe, which eventually resulted in the establishment of the subsidiary, which is staffed by some top-of-the-line pharmaceutists that Chloe herself had chosen, since they were so eager to work, much to Farma's delight. Subsequently, Charlotte brought the new survey results, which changed drastically compared to the previous ones, much to Farma's delight, as now the commoners are having a very positive opinion of the pharmacy. During his next meeting with the Empress, Farma got ordered to bring her first any new medicine or cosmetics he invents, which he agreed to, and went as far as to offer her a new lips cosmetic he made, which were to the liking of Elizabeth. The latter was also thankful for Farma's report over the toxicity of the former cosmetics, but she was also aware that banning these cosmetics had made businesses that used to sell them go bankrupt. As such, on top of allowing these cosmetics to be produced by other pharmacies, Elizabeth ordered Farma to increase the prices of his products, since the status quo will make him have a monopoly over cosmetics and medicine sales. Farma quickly agreed. A few days passed, and the de Médicis went to Marseille's port, where Bruno met his new accountant, Adam, to inspect his new estate's finances. Meanwhile, Farma couldn't stop being fascinated by the city's position as the naval gateway to the empire, as well as its prospering medical herbs plantations. However, the estate is having trouble with merchants from the Netherlands East India Company who were exploiting loopholes in their treaty with the empire, thus making them avoid paying any taxes in imperial ports. Despite that, Bruno wasn't as worried as Adam was, as he believed that keeping the status quo would make both population and merchants happy. Seeing that his son was bored, Bruno asked Farma to leave, as he could have a better time watching the ocean. Farma happily obliged. Once he got to the sea, Farma took a liking to the sand castle that Charlotte and Blanche had made. Before long, both girls began to persuade him into allowing them to swim, as they promised him that they wouldn't go anywhere deep. Reluctantly, Farma agreed, on condition that waters should cover only their feet. By the time both girls went to splash some water, Farma got taken by surprise when he learned that Eleanor was also there and got too excited by how much the former two were having fun, so much that she decided to take a dip herself. Despite Eleanor's persistence that Farma joins them, the latter decided to stay and watch them, especially with the sight of Blanche having so much fun reminding him of his actual younger sister Chiyu, save for the fact that he never allowed her to play in the ocean until she grows up next year. This would be the last time she'll have fun with her brother, as she got hospitalized not too long after. As he was having his head in the clouds, Farma woke up to Blanche getting swallowed by the ocean. He rushed to save her despite Eleonora's warnings, but the current had proven to be much faster than him, thus making him unable to catch up with Blanche. Seeing that she's now drowning and not wanting to lose a second sister, Farma dove inside the ocean to rescue Blanche. As the situation became so desperate, Farma screamed the name of his sister, which somehow activated the holy mark on his back, to the point that it created a hole inside the ocean. The hole he created in fact was so large to the point that Blanche and Eleonora were sleeping soundly on the ocean's ground. When she woke up, the latter was horrified when she noticed that Farma not only created a hole inside the ocean, but he's now carrying his sister while moving the hole itself, until eventually they made it safely back to shore. Fortunately for him, Blanche, although scared, is in perfect health. However, Eleonora still have a lot of questions that need to be answered, especially with Farma using his divine arts to outright eliminate an entire chink of the ocean from this world. Although Charlotte and himself were horrified by Eleonora's temper, the latter eventually expressed her amazement by what Farma had done, which was saving his sister's life. That night, Farma couldn't stop thinking about what happened, because he was on the verge of eliminating everything in the area other than salt and water, which includes his sister and Eleonora. On top of that, Charlotte's terrified look worried him as well. Although both of them tried to remain casual that night, an awkward silence took over their brief conversation. This status quo got cut short with Charlotte expressing that she wasn't scared of her master, but rather was left in awe by his overwhelming powers, before apologizing in tears for not being able to save Blanche's life in his stead. With Farma clearing off any remaining tensions, Charlotte thanked him sincerely and went to bed. Although tensions between the two had finally settled down, dark clouds were gathering elsewhere, as the incident got reported to Marciri's diocese. As such, a consensus that a search by every diocese in the Empire should be launched against this shadowless boy in order to eliminate him. A few days later, Farma was back to his pharmacy, where a lot of patients were waiting in line for their treatments. Although glad that the shop is getting increasingly busier, Farma took notice of clergy members in the corner of the pharmacy. He approached them to see if they needed any help, only for the latter two to glare at him with utter hostility before taking their leave. After discussing the matter with his comrades, they decided to inform the guards about these people's identity. On the next morning, as the guards were having their shift change, the guard opened the gate to a horrifying sight: a blinded horse running at full speed with a wagon full of clay. This news infuriated Bruno, making him swear to find out whoever is trying to mess with the de Médicis house. Aware that this will never be the last incident to happen, Bruno ordered the guard to inform the Imperial Palace at once. Just as Farma was about to make his way to the pharmacy, Bruno asked him if he knew of any suspect. Although he had a few suspects in mind, be it the pharmacists, guild and the men cloaked in white, Farma told his father that he still needed time to confirm the perpetrator's identity. Once he got to the pharmacy, Farma was relieved to learn that no one was hurt, but the pharmacy itself got a terrible blow, and many men were working on cleaning it. Cedric managed to purify the area of any contaminants, even if he can't clean the mess with his divine arts. Although frustrated by the terrible blow the pharmacy received, Farma was relieved that his laboratory wasn't affected. More good news came in the form of the medical recipes, and most of the research being relocated to the de Médicis house itself, as well as Eleonore and Charlotte. Moreover, many of the sailors, led by Jean, had volunteered to assist in repairing the pharmacy, while townsfolk assured that they'll always stand by his side against any evil person that would dare to obstruct his work. After all, Farma had done a lot to help them, and this is the least they can do to repay him. Moved by this devotion, Farma and Cedric thanked everyone. They couldn't get to help the volunteers, however, as a young lady rushed in looking for Farma. It turned out that her father had passed out and was still not waking up. So after getting assured by Jean and the volunteers that they'll manage the repairs on their own, Farma made for his patient immediately. On his way there, Farma kept on thinking of what might be the reason behind the father passing out. But by the time he reached the designated area, Farma began to notice that something is off. There's no man laying atop the hill, and the girl that guided him there is nowhere to be found. Before he knew it, Farma found himself surrounded by men in white cloaks, who introduced themselves as inquisitors, led by a certain salaryman. Salaryman, as well as the inquisitors that came with him, serves a much bigger institution called the Temple, which not only responsible for ascertaining newborn children into using divine arts, distinguishing nobles from commoners, but also chooses the ruler of the empire itself, which makes their authority above that of the empire itself effectively. If they ever felt threatened, the Temple has an Inquisition office that can do all of the dirty work for them, namely getting rid of heretics, not to say eliminating anyone that could pose a threat to the Temple's authority. Despite that, Eleonore assured him that he doesn't need to worry about them, since the Inquisitors don't go after normal people. This time, however, that does not seem to be the case, as Farma is now surrounded in the middle of the day. Not wanting to make his situation any worse, Farma decided to oblige to Salaryman's orders to walk backward, where the latter binded him. That attempt failed, as the cage he created shattered instantly, much to the Inquisitors' chagrin. The Inquisitors tried to throw fire and ice at him respectively, hoping that that will get him to show his true form, only to miserably fail yet again. Infuriated by Farma telling them that he's just a human, Salaman ordered that Farma be obliterated. Hearing this, the Inquisitors attacked him with all their might, only for them to not only fail, but ended up crossing the Rubicon for Farma, as he tried to avoid using violence this entire time. In retaliation, Farma broke his own shield, thus knocking Salaman off of his horse before he could even react.
Make the oxygen hand.
Everyone attack! For the holy being Theos, he results in my death.
Just as Farma was on the verge of using his powers to get rid of the Inquisitors, Salaman realized from the holy mark on Farma's arm, as well as him glowing brightly, that they're dealing with Theos himself, thus beginning to apologize with his comrades in droves. While they were at it, Salaman made Farma aware that he got severely injured after falling from his horse. Hoping to pay for the grave sin he and his comrades have committed by attacking a deity, Salaman attempted to peace out to become king of the afterlife. However, Farma intervened just in time to prevent such a thing from ever happening, clearly stating that he will wholeheartedly treat Salaman's injury, in exchange for them leaving him in his pharmacy alone, before beginning to examine the Inquisitor. He figured that this injury could be treated, but as it started glowing red, Farma began considering his course of action, which resulted in him concluding that a surgery is needed. Problem is, Farma is a pharmacist and knows very little about surgeries. To make matters worse, he has little to no time to search for a surgeon on his own, since Salaman's wound will get infected by the time a doctor arrives. As such, Farma decided to give first aid for Salaman, while another Inquisitor brought a carriage. After creating a platform to perform first aid on Salaman, Farma announced his procedure to his patient, before beginning his work in earnest. As part of his work, Farma began with spinal anesthesia, which made Salaman unable to feel pain at all, before proceeding to work on Salaman's injury with what little experience he had from performing surgeries on lab animals in his previous life. By the time he was done, Farma went to meet the other Inquisitors to inform them that their commander is in relatively good shape, as well as his intention to visit him and check on his condition periodically. Hearing this, the Inquisitors were unable to find a proper way to thank Theos for his kindness. A few months later, Eleonora was surprised to hear that the new bishop, namely Salaman, is now visiting them, while carrying a small gift. Naturally, his main purpose for this visit was to properly apologize for misbehaving before a deity, while properly thanking his liege lord by reporting to the higher-ups in the temple that there's no heretics found in St. Fleuve diocese, while promising Farma that he'll always deal with any such reports of heresy against Farma as long as he's a bishop, before proceeding to ask for a private conversation with the young pharmaceutic, which required Farma to close the pharmacy temporarily. During that period, Charlotte was about to enjoy eating the sweet that was gifted to her, when she was surprised to notice Blanche peeking at her like a hungry cat from the pharmacy's outer gate. Meanwhile, Salaman went ahead and gifted a special wand for Farma, which used to be a treasure that was kept in the guardian deity temple. The Panic Rabdos, as it was called, has the ability to amplify his combat stats, diagnostics, and most importantly, healing skills. Farma was initially skeptical, but ended up trying to pick it up under Salaman's insistence. As he did, the wand began to glow brightly, which was a sign that Farma had the wand's approval. Seeing that Eleonore was fascinated by the glowing wand, Farma decided to let her handle it. Much to her surprise, Eleonore wasn't even able to hold it. As it turned out, only guardian deities are able to hold such wand, which made Eleonore treating Farma as an actual god, much to the latter's annoyance. When the boy got curious about whether this wand could float, he tested it out and was surprised to find out that it does, much to Salaman and Eleonore's delight. By the time he was done, Salaman thanked Farma for the audience he granted him, before assuring him that the temple will never go after him ever again, and that the temple has no involvement in the carriage incident. Before he goes, Salaman gave Farma a medal that suppresses his divine arts ability, thus concealing the fact that he's a deity, much to Farma's delight. Once this meeting was over, Farma went shopping with Blanche and Charlotte, where he took notice of a woman arguing with a pharmacist about him lacking specific medicines that only Parallel World Pharmacy sells, before the latter resorting to accuse Farma's pharmacy for being a heretical place. To top it off, the pharmacist's boss, Pierre, came out and started accusing Farma of obtaining his reputation as part of an aristocratic scheme, and since they're refusing to enter the guild, there's no commoner pharmacy from there that can use the same medicines as those of Farma's, much to the chagrin of the woman, and Farma, who has been seeing this argument taking place from afar before his younger sister's arrival. On his way back to the pharmacy, Farma's contemplation resulted in him deciding to create a separate guild of his own, which he'll start with the Demadique for the time being, as he hoped that more pharmacies might join it eventually. With Cedric agreeing to take care of all the necessary paperwork, Farma could only hope that his newly established guild gets approved. The next morning, Veron was getting increasingly frustrated by the seemingly unstoppable success of Farma's pharmacy, which has been attracting the poorest citizens to purchase medicines from them. Assuming that it's thanks to Bruno's support that Farma has been successful in running his pharmacy, as well as the Empress. Seeing how apoplectic Veron was by Farma's success, one of the guild's members mentioned the whispers that Veron must have been the instigator of the carriage's incident. Angered by that, Veron ordered that no guild members shall contact Farma or his pharmacy until the citizens wake up to the truth and cease to interact with Farma, further threatening with the expulsion of any that dares to break this rule. Elsewhere, Pierre kept on knocking violently at a doctor's door with his daughter on his back, when a passing-by Farma informed him that the doctor won't be available for another week. After introducing himself, the man wanted to refuse Farma's offer of treating his daughter, since he's a member of the guild itself. But faced with the abysmal situation his daughter was in, he reluctantly accepted Farma's offer and followed him to the pharmacy. Instead of entering with him through the main gate, Farma took his patient through the pharmacy's back door, since he wanted to treat his daughter urgently, as well as avoid spreading infection. However, Pierre interpreted it as a mistreatment of people based on their class, initially, but ended up learning the truth shortly after he wore the face mask. That wasn't the end of it. Pierre was further impressed by how much detail Farma went to examine his daughter's health, which included recording her weight, checking her tongue and throat, as well as using divine arts, before Farma concluding that the young Marie is suffering from a severe cold, which we do know as influenza. In order to treat her, Farma offered her a medicine that can be taken through inhalation. The more details Farma went through, the more Pierre began to have second thoughts at the rhetoric Veron has been spreading. Eventually, Pierre took his daughter out of the pharmacy, under Farma's supervision, as Marie's condition drastically improved, albeit she still needed to take her treatment for the next few days. Although impressed by the professional treatment Marie received, Pierre was still concerned that the treatment might cost him a kidney by American standards, only to be taken aback when he heard that the treatment's cost is roughly that of a baguette. By the time Farma was gone, and after seeing that his daughter is feeling much better now, Pierre finally began to grasp why the guild can never compete with parallel world pharmacy. Once at home, Pierre was busy working on some medicines of his, when his wife Leonie informed him that their daughter is sleeping soundly, before getting concerned that her husband had bought her medicines from Farma's pharmacy, since that's against the guild's policies. But hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. However, he was frustrated at how incomparable his experience and knowledge were in comparison to those of Farma. Leonie tried to soothe him but ended up breaking into tears as soon as she saw her husband crying, for if he continued working with the ways he learned from the guild, he might lose his wife or daughter to an illness, while he'll end up standing helpless. On their next meeting, all the guild members were infuriated that Farma's success is showing no sign of stopping. To make matters worse, their own pharmacies had marked up to 20% loss, while Veron admitted that he caught his wife purchasing cosmetics from Farma's pharmacy. Naturally, news of the temple's visit further worsened the guild's cause. When asked for his opinion, Pierre had had enough, and decided to speak candidly, that he had visited Farma's pharmacy and witnessed firsthand the vast difference between their pharmacies and his, including the communication with patients, the knowledge of the pharmacist, his ability to examine his patients, his medicines, and lastly his prices. Hearing this, Veron was apoplectic, as he frowned at Pierre and his claims, insisting that Farma is using imperial status to attract people, while adding that Farma sees commoners as nothing but a source of money. After the long grandiose Ververne made, Pierre insisted that everything he Ververne mentioned further proves that they need to learn from Farma in order to prosper and be able to compete, as they don't even know if the herbs they're selling works or not, while making fraudulent claims on their knowledge. After all, the vast majority of the patients that visited them had met their end. Although most of the attendees agreed with Pierre, his words didn't get through Ververne's thick skull, who proceeded in kicking Pierre from the guild for good. To make matters worse, Pierre arrived to the horrifying sight of his pharmacy left in ruins. To his luck, Farma arrived and learned that Pierre is also a pharmacist, just like himself. After learning about what happened to Pierre, and after seeing how bitterly Leonie was looking at him and bearing witness to Pierre's determination to keep on contributing to the pharmaceutical field, Farma took on the opportunity to invite Pierre to his guild, since he recently got the approval from the Empress to start his own guild. In the next few days, Pierre, alongside his family, were preparing to reopen their pharmacy. Pierre was reluctant initially, as he remained doubtful that people might buy from someone who's not Farma, but with his daughter's encouragement, Pierre opened the gate of his pharmacy, only to see plenty of people from all social classes waiting for his opening, thus starting a bright new chapter in the Dawn Pharmacy. On an unrelated note, Bruno woke up from a bad dream he had where he met with a criminal called Camus, as he still couldn't comprehend his reasoning behind the gruesome experiments he did on other people. Apparently, this bad dream shook Bruno so badly, to the point he couldn't stop thinking of it even during breakfast, where he almost informed Farma about it, had he not restrained himself at the last second. Before long, Bruno received an unexpected letter from his eldest son, Palle. His mother was excited for the fact that Palle will be visiting them in the next few days, but Bruno shattered her hopes when he informed her that Palle's visit will be delayed. After all, he must be busy with his studies at the Novel College of Medicines, which Blanche struggled to pronounce in the cutest way possible, before proceeding to express how brilliant both her brothers are. Amidst this brief moment of happiness, Bruno asked Farma to come to his office later. It was there that Farma was told that the capital will host the St. Fleuve Fair next month, which apparently Farma already knew about, since this is where merchants from the entire world gather there for a month. This time, Bruno advised that his son exercise caution, since a strange epidemic broke out in an island that belongs to the neighboring Netherlands, which according to Palle, had wiped out an entire settlement of 1,000 colonists. Unfortunately, Bruno knew nothing about it yet, as the samples that were taken to Novel College had caused 2 of its researchers to lose their lives. Although the virus vanished entirely from that island, the merchant took a lot of goods to shop from there to the Empire. And since they'll be entering the Empire through the port of Marseille, and given the possibility they might carry anything that has that epidemic, Bruno ordered that all of these goods be incinerated before they arrived to the city. To Farma, he was aware that Bruno took the right course of action, but he was nevertheless even more concerned about the symptoms of this illness, especially that they greatly resemble those of the Black Death itself, a notoriously deadly plague that wiped out nearly half of Europe back in the 14th century. In order to confirm his doubts, Farma needed more information, which required his older brother Pally sending him sketches of the tests he performed. At the Imperial Palace, Elizabeth was ecstatic by the drastic reduction of the death toll among the capital's citizens, thanks to Farma's pharmacy, as well as the growing number of members of his newly established guild. Seeing how her Minister of Home Affairs is looking forward to seeing the Empire prosper thanks to Farma's contribution, Elizabeth couldn't resist publicly making an ironic thrust at his previous skepticism that a 10-year-old child can run a pharmacy. Nevertheless, Elizabeth was eager to reward Farma with the title of an Archduke, and she would have done so, hadn't the imperial law prevented her from giving such a grand title to a minor. Nevertheless, that didn't stop the Empress from thinking of something to support the young Farma with, as well as praying that this age of prosperity for the Empire will never end. Back at Parallel World Pharmacy, Eleonore arrived to learn the terrible news from Farma in regard to the imminent arrival of the fatal disease. While they were at it, Charlotte arrived with a letter sent via pigeon from his elder brother, which confirmed Farma's worst fears that Yersinia pestis, the virus that caused the Black Death in the real world, also exists in this one. Not wanting to waste time, Farma sent his subordinates to Marseille, where they'll oversee alongside the city's acting governor the follow-up of the quarantine measures, hoping to prevent the spread of this disease as much as possible. Naturally, Farma advised extreme caution and diligence when inspecting the cargoes from the Netherlands. Once this meeting was done, Farma went with his tutor to meet his father, who had reached a similar conclusion based on the reports he received before becoming relieved at the precautions that Farma informed Adam with. Despite that, Bruno was also worried that this plague might doom the Empire if it ever reaches the capital, but Farma assured him that it can be saved, as he managed to create a new medicine called levofloxacin, and also had his partners cooperate to package this antibiotic. Although these measures further impressed Bruno, Farma reminded him that their first line of defense would rely on preventing the virus from spreading altogether, which is why Bruno headed to the Imperial Palace at once. Once the Empress became aware of what's happening, she approved immediately of the establishment of inspection zones, as well as limiting entry points to Marseille. To ensure that the virus won't spread, she made sure to pass a declaration where all rodents shall be eliminated, as well as having all citizens boil their clothes to get rid of any fleas, before reminding Farma and his father that she has utmost trust in their judgment. Farma didn't stop there, as he went ahead to inspect preparations in person, by providing them all the equipment necessary to inspect and treat those that needed to be treated freely, before entrusting the capital's fate to Pierre. At the Imperial Palace, Elizabeth was delighted that the protective measures were working smoothly. More good news came from the temple, who gathered practitioners to strengthen their purification patrols. Although Elizabeth was well aware that these measures will drain the imperial treasury, she was also aware that the chaos this plague can cause will be far more devastating to the Empire internally and abroad. As such, she ordered her ministers to put all of the Empire's resources at Farma's needs. Although Farma was concerned that his efforts might fail at containing the Empire, let alone preventing it from entering the Empire altogether, he was assured by Eleonore, Charlotte and Cedric that he'll do well, given that he had saved countless lives already, and that he'll succeed at that in this case too, thus rejuvenating his spirit once more. Although things seemed to be going well for now, Farma was unaware that Camus had appeared in the Imperial Temple, and made it unable to take part in the defense against the plague, before heading to the quarantined city of Marseille, which became infested with rodents. By the time Farma arrived, the merchant ships were about to sail. Although he, just like Eleanor, wanted to visit Marseille in better circumstances, their top priority now was to prevent Yersinia pestis from making landfall. The initial reports seemed promising, with all ships, despite not having any infections spotted, got purified for good measures. Although relieved with this good news, Farma and Eleanor made for one of the ships for further inspections. They were met with an angry captain, who was frustrated by his inability to port yet. Farma assured him that he will, as soon as his ship is confirmed to have no signs of plague upon it. After further questioning with the ship's physician, and even more questions with the ship's captain about his cargo, Farma proceeded to inspect the crew in person. Once the ship was determined to be clear of any plague signs, Farma offered the captain documents to hand on land, while offering the physician a list of prescriptions for the sailors. Although the young pharmacist was relieved with the outcome of the first inspection, the next one did not begin well, as the captain of the second ship was so frustrated with the delay that he threw apples at Farma's boat, which not only provoked an altercation with other ships in waiting, which ended with the intervention of the Imperial fleet itself, led by a famous Jean, who made sure that these foreign merchants obliged to waiting by force. After having a word with the Navy commander, where Farma thanked his counterpart, he proceeded to encourage his comrades on land to work harder. Before they could do anything, however, Adam came with bad reports, where people from the nearby village of Lestock died after having severe fever. On top of that, these deaths occurred after foreign merchants, who were unable to keep on waiting in port, had smuggled their goods illegally through that town, instead of waiting to land in the village without getting inspected. Not wanting to waste any more time after this catastrophic news, Farma decided to pick his protective gear and made for Lestat at once. Eleanor wanted him to stay, as she believed that Farma is the only one who's able to inspect and identify any signs of the plague, but the latter assured her that she's more than capable of doing that task in his stead. Before leaving Marsyria atop his wand, while he was thinking of what he should do there to contain the plague, a gull took him by surprise and almost made him bump into a tree. Hadn't his wand had the power to make him get past it unscathed? Although thankful for this outcome, Farma was in a race against time as he took notice of villagers attempting to flee the city. As such, Farma stood in their way to prevent them from leaving. The superstitious and already panicking horde didn't take kindly to Farma's request, and to make matters worse, they raised weapons to what they assumed as the evil spirit that wants to eliminate them all. Left with no other options, Farma used his magic to contain them and the village altogether, before finally introducing himself as the pharmacist from the capital that will save them from the Black Death. Although he didn't promise them that he'll save them all from this plague, Farma promised to keep deaths to a minimum as long as the villagers remain cooperative, to which they obliged. For starters, Farma ordered that the town be segregated into 3 parts, the most inner part for the most ill people, the second for the mildly infected, while the last for the fully healthy people. It was only after he stated his intentions to heal as many people as possible that the villagers decided to comply. Meanwhile, Jingli's crew spotted what seemed to be the renegade vessel they've been searching for. Upon closer inspection, Jingli took notice that the ship was raising flags that it needed urgent medical help, since it was infected, but when they further looked at its crew from afar, the ship's crew were all goners. Not wanting to risk the lives of his crew in a hopeless search for survivors, Jing gave orders to sink the ship with everyone and everything in it. Although such a decision was hard for him, Jing made it clear that this is a funeral bombardment. Back in Lestat town, the distribution of the medicines upon the mildly infected part of the village, much to the villagers' delight. When it came to treating the most infected part of the city, Farma decided to go at it alone, starting with the hospital where these people are located in that area. For now, let's take a bit of a break from Farma's venture in Lestat, and take a look elsewhere, where an old lady, namely Louise Casper, overheard 2 colleagues of hers discussing a certain issue they've been having, and even turning down her offer to help. After all, who would bother interacting with someone that will retire by next year anyway? Apparently Louise was well aware of that, so she mentioned it to one of her students, who couldn't bear seeing her teacher in this miserable state, after all the scientific contributions she made. Suddenly, another student of hers, Kiara, entered her office to inform her that the college's president needs her in his office immediately. Back to our boy, he entered the hospital where he was met with some medieval plague doctors from the temple, except in white. Some were not welcoming of Farma initially, but their demeanor changed right after figuring out who he was, thus allowing him to help treat the infected by all means necessary. Farma was aware that there's little he can do with the extremely advanced cases, but he was still going to give it his best shot nonetheless. As such, he ordered the Inquisitors to split the patients after having them inspected. Out of the 14 patients, 12 are infected, 1 doesn't, and another has perished. Fortunately for him, he had enough medicines for these 12 patients, so after informing the only person that isn't plagued about his case, Farma proceeded to treat the other 12. It was only then that Farma realized that he lacks the staff to keep on taking care of these cases. And to make matters worse, there's God knows how many more are still waiting for help in the nearby church. That wasn't the end of it, because the longer he stays in there, the higher the chances the plague reaches the capital. Hearing that the Inquisitors just finished taking care of the patients in the hospital, Farma ordered that they look for the villagers that are heading to the capital, inspect their cargoes, burn them if they were infected, and tend to the infected people by offering them medicines and all. That night in Marsyria, Farma received the last of the samples to be tested, which he'll be testing for the last time before catching up with the Inquisitors. Once they were confirmed to be in good shape, Farma gave green light for the ship to dock, before heading out himself immediately. By the time he was gone, Eleanor couldn't help but wish that he could stay for much longer, since he's far much more skilled than her, even if she was getting the gist of this procedure. It only took her the assurance of her colleagues that she's just as precise and fast as Farma at her job, that they all proceeded with their inspection once again. Remember Professor Louise from earlier? She was summoned by Bruno over the topic of her research. Louise assumed that Bruno was going to tell her that he'll be cutting funds for them, until Bruno informed her that that's not the case, as he needs her efforts for a job that no one else in the Empire, save for his youngest son, can do. Louise thought that Bruno might be exaggerating, but the latter assured her that she is, since her expertise in microorganisms is much needed to find a specific medicine. After further inspecting the document that Bruno gave her, Louise immediately identified that this specimen was a topic of research in her office for years, much to Bruno's surprise. Thanks to her efforts, Bruno decided to establish a special presidential budget for her, thus putting her retirement on hold, much to Louise's delight. This brief celebration couldn't last for long, however, as Kiara entered the lab with urgent reports from Marsyria. Back to Lestat, the city's mayor was relieved to learn that half of the most infected cases have stabilized. Despite that, Farma made it clear that this is not the time to relax yet. Although the city is protected through a huge barrier shield with divine arts in it, Farma ordered that none of the villagers are permitted to touch rodents or fleas unless examined, and avoid them altogether if they had to leave the city. After leaving the village, Farma was on his way to the capital, when he noticed a fire in the woods. As it turned out, the Inquisitors had caught the suspected merchants and burned their smuggled goods. The smugglers were not willing to cooperate initially, until Farma came in and informed them that they're infected with the Black Death, and that he won't give them treatment unless they answer his questions. It was only then that they revealed that their goods were shipped from Pante Island, the same island where the plague originated. To make matters worse, the goods had rodents on them. To make matters worse, the smugglers revealed that there were 24 of them in total, as well as 5 holy knights. Aware that the holy knights are supposed to be practitioners of divine arts as well, the Inquisitors began to wonder about what's actually going on. It was only then that Farma began to suspect that these knights are conspiring against the Empire, and that the rumors of the assassination attempts against the Empress herself wouldn't be off the table either. Although the Inquisitors advised against treating these smugglers, Farma decided to treat them before turning them to authorities. In the Imperial Palace, Elizabeth learned about what happened in Lestock. Aware that these smugglers' destination would be the capital, and that they'll arrive either today or tomorrow, Elizabeth ordered that security around the capital entrances must be strengthened, especially around Gate 6. At first light, Charlotte began to distribute face masks for everyone in the capital, while Pierre was in charge of inspecting all samples. It didn't take him long to identify the samples provided from Gate 6 as infected, which got him and his colleagues to isolate these people and treat them at once. Everything seemed to go relatively smoothly so far, until the 5 holy knights breached the city gates. To make matters worse, they made a sick and severely weakened smuggler come with a huge cage full of rats. Although the latter died right after passing the city gate, the Holy Knight not only opened up the cage but helped spread them in all directions using his divine arts. As soon as he came out of the destroyed tent, Pierre was horrified by the sight of rodents spreading across the capital. So he rushed to the guards and ordered that emergency bells must be rung instantly, and that they should take down all rodents or else the disease will spread. Although everyone were horrified by what's going on, Camus was delighted by this turn of events. At the Imperial Palace, Elizabeth was surprised to learn that this invasion from the Netherlands is being conducted by mere 5 knights, thinking that such mega force doesn't need to be crushed. However, Bruno argued that this attack came with the intention of plaguing the Empire as a whole, which is an attack against Imperial sovereignty that still didn't make much sense, as the Netherlands were supposed to be allies with the Empire for a solid while, and that the death of their previous monarch wasn't supposed to change much, which made Bruno believe that this attack must have been launched by someone who knew how the Black Death operates. Hearing this, the Empress assumed that Bruno had an idea of the instigator's identity, and she was right. As Bruno explained, the Netherlands had recruited a commoner pharmaceutic that's known for his shady practices, and that his practices matches those that Bruno knew in that person. To Claude's shock, he knew who this pharmaceutic was, who despite being a renowned pharmaceutic, engaged in gruesome experiences on other human beings, as he lacked morality and humanity. As such, the Inquisitors sealed off his divine arts and cast him aside as a commoner. What's more important, however, was his practices against prisoners of war when it came to poisons, and how they would spread from a person to another. In other words, plagues. When it came to his identity, Bruno identified him as Camus de Sade, the man who he made a solemn oath to eliminate himself. In the capital city, the Serene Plaza turned into a war zone, which got the Imperial Temple involved. Seeing that these holy knights drifted from the temple's doctrine, Salaryman paralyzed them and stripped them of their divine arts, as they deemed no longer worthy of them. Meanwhile, Charlotte became increasingly concerned with the turn of events in this city until she noticed that Farmer arrived. Once he stood atop the church bell's tower, Farmer began to inspect how far had the plague spreaded. To make matters worse, Farmer was horrified that the rodents spreading this disease are flying squirrels. As he was on his way towards Gate 6, Farmer saw his father heading there, so he decided to meet him and inform him about the situation in Marseille. At Gate 6, Salaryman and the guards were surprised to learn that the Holy Knights did only what they were told by a possessed figure, as he was holding thousands of people hostage. When Bruno arrived, his worst fears were confirmed. It was indeed Camus who was behind this. After ordering the burial of the diseased knights, Bruno moved ahead to deal with that fiend. While they were overseeing the burning of all the smuggled goods, Farma took notice of Camus' presence atop his pharmacy, so he headed to his pharmacy immediately. Bruno also learned about what's happening and ordered that the bells must not stop ringing. As the bells already stopped, Charlotte thought that it's finally safe to head back to the pharmacy, unaware of the danger that awaits her there. Seeing that the pharmacy's windows were open, Charlotte assumed that Farma had returned. As she was about to enter, the bells rang once again, which made Cedric open the pharmacy's door to take shelter inside, but not before realizing that there's something wrong. By the time Charlotte entered the lab, she was surprised to see that no one was there. Seeing that she was about to shut the windows, Cedric prevented her from doing so. It'll be the last thing he'll do before Camus attacked him from behind, thus leaving Charlotte completely vulnerable. It was only then that Farmer arrived and took notice of Camus's presence inside the building, with his father arriving shortly after. Once the two entered the lab, Bruno ordered his son to treat Cedric and Charlotte's wounds, while he dealt with Camus in person. Pharma struggled with figuring out the poison that's running in his comrades' bodies, as there were many of them, although he eventually managed to get rid of the poisons in their bodies. His father didn't seem to be doing well, as Camus was overpowering him. As Camus began to approach Pharma with the purpose of creating a poison before him, Pharma eliminated the phosphate he possessed, before going ahead and punching the incurable psychopath. Shocked by the immense power and knowledge Pharma had, Camus began relating themselves, concluding that Pharma will end up just like him. However, Pharma wasn't buying any of that, as he believed that even if people were to scorn and frown at him, he was still choosing to help them nonetheless, before proceeding to give a series of hits that, although caused severe damage to the pharmacy, ended up with eliminating Camus for good. In the aftermath of this crisis, Pharma managed to treat Charlotte and Cedric's wounds properly. Eleonora's inspection of the arriving ships ended in great success, as it prevented any influx of the Black Death in the Empire. Thanks to that, Pharma managed to produce additional doses of levofloxacin to be distributed over other pharmacies to treat the most infected people freely. Despite not being able to save everyone in the capital, the threat of the Black Death subsided, thus giving a huge room for the capital to recover. This came in the form of further developments in vaccine production, led by Louise herself. In 2 months, Elizabeth declared that the Black Death had officially ended, which was met with huge celebrations in all corners of the capital. Subsequently, Charlotte, Eleanor, Cedric, and Pharma had all celebrated the resumption of business in Parallel World Pharmacy, much to their delight. While they hoped that they'd never have to close for such a long time ever again, Jean-Pierre and Salomon entered the pharmacy, with Jean handing a small gift to Charlotte from the fair, before opening the pharmacy for many more people waiting outside, much to Pharma's delight. That concludes the anime recap. As always, if you enjoyed, let me know down below and I'm out.